This video is going to be a guide on the economy and planetary management in Stellaris. So I'm going to start with a very basic overview of the main resources of the game and what they generally do. The first is energy credits, which is used in the upkeep of almost pretty much everything in the game. Buildings, ships, star bases, and so on. Then there are minerals, which are primarily used for constructing buildings and also for refining into some of these more advanced resources. Food should be very straightforward. It's primarily used to feed your organic pops. Consumer goods are one of the resources that you can refine minerals into, and they are used in the upkeep of your free pops, and they're also used to develop your society and things like research and traditions. Then there are alloys, which is another thing that minerals refine into, and they're used in the construction of ships and star bases. Trade is used for logistics for both your ships, your planets, and also to buy things on the market. I'll skip over the strategic resources for now. Influence is for expanding your borders. Unity is primarily for traditions and edicts. And research is of course for getting new technologies. The primary way that you're going to be getting a large majority of your resources is through your planets. There's two main types of things you can construct on your planet. There are buildings, which use these kind of slots here. You can click on them, select a building, and then there are districts, and there's several types of districts, and you can click this button to increase their level. These districts down here are your basic resource districts. So generator districts get you energy credits, mining districts get you minerals, agriculture districts get you food, and then city districts are a lot more flexible. They give you access to the majority of your building slots, and they also have 2 district specialization slots. So to start out with, we have the Archives District Specialization, which gets us a bit of each of the types of research as well as Unity, and then we have a Mixed Industry Specialization, which gets us both consumer goods and alloys. If you click on your city district, you can see your 2 district specializations, and using this button here, you can go ahead and replace them with a different specialization. There's a whole bunch of different options here. And an important thing to note is that depending on the specialization you choose, it restricts the type of buildings that you can build in the slots associated with that specialization. These first 6 slots, though it's really 5 because you can't remove this first planetary government building, are basically wildcard slots that can build anything, but these slots here are limited by that district specialization. So right here, our only options are alloy foundries or civilian industries, so basically industrial buildings. In our archives, our only options are administrative offices and research labs, so research and Unity production. And then the district specialization directly gives you jobs for every level of the district. So if we were to expand our city district, we would get a little bit of research, a little bit of Unity, a little bit of consumer goods, a little bit of alloys. But if you really want to focus on one of these particular resources more than the others, that's where these buildings are useful. So say for example, if we want more alloys, say we're trying to build up our fleet, you could build an alloy foundries building instead of just upgrading your district. Another thing that it comes to districts is you can't just build an unlimited amount of districts, much like building slots that are limited in how many you can build. There are also district slots. So the planet as a whole has a limited number of districts that it can have across all of the different district types. And then some districts also have individual limits as well on top of that. The number of districts that your planet can have is determined by the planet's size. So in total, we can have 20 districts on this planet. City districts are unlimited. You can build as many as you can fit on the planet. So that is why we have 3 out of 20. However, say our generator districts, we can only build a maximum of 8 on this planet. Or say our agriculture districts, we can only build a maximum of 7 on this planet. You get district slots for these basic resources from the planetary features that are in the management page. So you can see here, +3 maximum generator districts from this thing. And some of these features are blockers. So say this industrial wasteland is reducing the maximum number of districts on the planet by 1, and it's also blocking this prosperous mesa, which could give us +2 mining districts. So you can pay this cost here and clear the blocker, and then that way we could build up to 2 more mining districts, You can see these crossed out ones here. We could unlock these two, and we could unlock one of these here. An important concept to understand is that these buildings and districts do not give you resources directly. Instead, what they do is create jobs that you need your population to actually work. If you go to the Management tab, you can see a breakdown of all of the pops on your planet. They're organized by species, then their tier, and then by their individual ethics. So then we can go to the Economy tab and we can actually see all of the jobs that are on this planet. They are organized into different tiers. At the very bottom you have civilians, which think of them kind of like unemployed pops. Pops will automatically become civilians if there's not enough jobs available on the planet. They tend to be very inefficient in terms of the resources that they yield, so generally speaking, if you have civilians, that is an indication that you should be building more things on your planet, or that you should move them to another planet that has jobs, but I'll talk about migration more later. Then there are your workers, which typically give you the basic resources, so these first three here, and then specialists typically get you your more advanced resources, so things like consumer goods, alloys, trade, unity, research, all of this other stuff. And then elites basically organize your planet and help keep it stable. To visualize the flow of resource that's happening on this planet, I've made a flowchart. So we have our generator districts making us technician jobs that get us energy. We have agriculture districts that give us farmer jobs and get us food. Mining districts that get us miner jobs that get us minerals. These minerals are going into our mixed industry district specialization in our city district, which is producing us both a bit of consumer goods as well as alloys. These alloys can be made into ships, which can increase our influence by increasing your power projection and just generally be used to defend or expand your empire. And then the consumer goods are going back into the archive specialization of our city district, which turns into a bit of research and a bit of unity. So hopefully this illustrates why minerals are so important for your economy. Not only are they used to actually build most of these buildings, they're also used as the input good for pretty much all of these other things that you really need to further your empire. For the vast majority of playthroughs, the first thing that I recommend building is a mining district. You want to be getting more minerals, which allows you to build more buildings faster, and it allows you to expand your production of industrial goods. However, we're not able to afford this right now. We still need 100 more minerals. On your resources, the first number is your current stockpile, and then the second number is how much it's going to change every month. So because we're making 20 minerals a month, it would take us 5 months in order to be able to afford this mining district. So you could just wait to get those minerals and then do it that way. However, when you're actually constructing something, you have a build queue. You can only be building one thing on the planet at a time. And particularly in the early game, we start out with a bunch of these civilians. They don't produce resources very efficiently. You want these civilians working these more productive jobs to get you more valuable resources. So you want to have your build queue actively working as much as possible as long as you have population that needs a job. So instead of waiting, what we can do is use the market. You can click on this option, or you can also click on the resource you want to trade and it will open that up in the market directly. So we can either choose to buy or sell the different resources, and you use trade in order to make these purchases. This is like your money. So in this case, we have enough trade to afford 100 minerals. That's the amount we need. So we can click this button. Now we have enough minerals. We'll talk more about the market later. But for now, we can start working on this mining district right away. And if we hover over this mining district, we can see a breakdown of exactly what it'll do once it's built. It will have an upkeep of 1 energy credit per month. It will give our planet 200 housing and 200 miner jobs. It's important to note that you pay the upkeep regardless of whether the jobs are actually being worked or not. So try not to build things unless you know you're actually going to be able to employ them in the near future. And then those 200 miner jobs will produce approximately 10 minerals per month. One of the biggest bottlenecks of your economy is how many pops you have, so it's really important to make sure you can get as many pops as possible. If you go to the management screen, you can see how much pop growth you're getting. On this planet, we're currently getting 5.27 pops per month. So it would take about 40 months in order to be able to get enough pops to work all of the jobs from, say, a basic mining district. So pop growth is kind of complicated, and I will try to simplify this as much as possible. If you hover over the planet size, you can see an estimation of your planet capacity. Planet capacity is basically how many pops can live on this planet. And this is determined by a whole bunch of factors, a big one being having a bunch of housing that your pops can live in, but also having a good planetary habitability and having as few blockers as possible on the planet. The reason that planet capacity is important is that pops grow fastest at about half of the planet capacity. Basically, the way to think about it is because pops produce more pops, the more pops there are, the faster they grow. But as the planet gets overcrowded, it becomes harder to find the space for all of the new pops, so pop growth naturally declines. So you want to try to aim to be right in that sweet spot of having lots of pops reproducing, but also having plenty of room for them to grow into. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I've been bashing my head against a wall trying to figure out a way to describe this. Basically, a very quick rule of thumb to follow is look at this planet capacity, aim to have about half of that as your population. So on this planet, we would want to aim to have about 3,800 pops. Now this planet capacity number is not 100% accurate, and there's a whole bunch of different things going into this, so don't worry about it too much. It's just generally aim for that kind of number. Let's give an example. Right now, I've just colonized another world, and there's currently 100 pops on this planet. If we look at our pop growth, we're currently only making 0.23 pops a month. That is basically nothing. So if we look at our planet capacity, we want to aim to get this planet to about 3,800 pops. How do we do that? Well, you could just try and wait for this pop to grow, but that will take forever. Instead, what you want to do is migration. If you go over to the economy tab and then click on this resettle button, it opens up this menu. Currently we have our two different planets, our colony of Camelot and our capital world of Unity. You can use this drop-down menu to select any of the planets within your empire, and you can use these arrow buttons to move your pops between the planet. This costs some energy and Unity, so if we click on this button, we have now moved 100 pops over to this planet. So we can just continue doing that until we reach the amount of pops that we'd like to get on the planet, or at least as much as we can afford. Now this planet has 900 pops. You can see that by moving these pops over to this planet, we're now making 1.9 pops a month, rather than just like 0.2. And on our capital world of Unity, we're making 5.79 pops a month. But before we resettled these pops, we only made 5.27 pops a month on our capital. This is because our capital was over that midpoint of population to planet capacity ratio and was getting a penalty to its pop growth from overcrowding. So by moving these pops, we not only increased the pop growth on our colony, we also increased the pop growth on our capital for a total increase of 2.19 pops a month. So this is why in the early game, you want to colonize a couple of worlds as quickly as possible and all get them to that sweet spot of about half of their planet capacity. What you don't want to do is have all of your pops concentrated onto a single world that's overcrowded. And you also don't want a ton of really underdeveloped colonies either. So I recommend not just colonizing every single world that you see, but first make sure that you have enough population to move over to that colony in order to make it self-sufficient. In the long run, that will really increase your population growth and make your economy much stronger. If you don't want to pay this cost to resettle, or you have resettlement banned in your policies tab, another way to get pops to move to another planet is through migration. Civilians will attempt to move to a planet that has available jobs so that they can be employed. Because our colony starts with 200 colonist jobs, but you only have 100 pops living there right now, if we let time pass, over time, pops are going to move to this planet and fill up this job. So if you build more jobs on the planet, you can encourage migration to it. Let's go through some other things on this planet window. Stability over 50% gives you a bonus to your resources from jobs and makes pops more likely to move there and less likely to move away. Having under 50% has the inverse effects, so you get a penalty from your resources from jobs and it makes it more likely for pops to leave. And if the stability remains under 25 for over a year, there's a chance of your planet revolting from your empire. Stability is primarily determined by the pop approval rating. That is how happy the population on your planet is. In the management tab, you can see a breakdown of the exact happiness of each individual pop. One of the main ways to keep your population happy is to have a surplus of amenities. If there's a deficit of amenities, you get a major pop happiness reduction. You can get amenities through a wide variety of different sources. For example, on this planet, we have Medical Center, which is giving us medical worker jobs, providing us with some amenities. A really good option for amenities is the Luxury Residences building. This one gives you a flat 1,500 amenities that don't require a job to be worked to get them. So all you need to do is pay this 2 energy upkeep, and you can save your pops to go work more important jobs. Particularly useful when you have a lot of extra building slots. For example, when you've just settled a new colony. Another thing that affects your pop's happiness is in the government tab. If you go to factions, if your faction is really happy with you, all associated pops will get a happiness bonus. And if your faction doesn't like you, then you'll get a happiness reduction. Another important concept when it comes to pop approval rating is political power. So basically, pops with a higher political power contribute more happiness to the planet's pop approval rating than pops with less political power. So because typically speaking, your elites have more political power than something like the specialists or workers, if your elites are unhappy, it's going to have a bigger effect on your planetary stability than something like the same amount of workers being unhappy. So the 2 main ways of improving stability are to make your pops more happy or to decrease the political power of the pops that are unhappy. Another major factor contributing to a pop's happiness is in the species tab. You have the species rights. So for example, the pop's living standards will have a big impact on their happiness. Basically, you can give your pops more consumer goods in order to make them happier. These policies are the main way you affect your pop's political power. An example of a way that you might use these rights is to reduce the political power of a new species that you've just conquered in order to keep your newly conquered planet stable. Another thing that can affect your stability is crime. If it gets over 30%, it gives you a chance to get several negative events. Every pop produces a bit of crime depending on their happiness. Happier pops produce less crime. The main way of reducing crime is through enforcer jobs. Then there's housing. This one's pretty straightforward. All of the pops on your planet need a place to live. If there's not enough housing for everyone, it reduces the stability of your planet and makes them more likely to move away. Typically, this isn't something to worry about too much. Your districts give you housing and usually it's more than enough. Another thing is that your planets can have a governor assigned to it, so you can pick one of your leaders to assign to that planet. They give you different bonuses depending on the leader type, whether they're an official, scientist, or commander. All of the different governor types reduce the empire size from pops. Typically, you'll want your officials as your governors because they give you more resources from most of your jobs. Scientists give you more job efficiency for your researchers. And then commanders give you more job efficiency for your workers at the cost of job efficiency for your specialists. And they also help increase your stability and they reduce crime. So generally speaking, if you can afford it, you should try and put governors on your most important worlds. If you want to know more about governors, you can watch my leaders guide. If you click this button here, you can access a couple of planetary decisions. For example, distribute luxury goods. You can spend some consumer goods to increase the amenities on the planet. Right next to that is the terraform button, which once you've researched the relevant technologies, allows you to terraform the world into a different planet class. This can help you improve the habitability of that world. If, say, you end up in an unideal situation where an enemy fleet is bombarding your world, you will gradually get planetary devastation. This reduces the available housing, amenities, resources from jobs. However, it also reduces the upkeep of those jobs, reduces your pop growth speed, makes people not want to move to a place that's actively being bombed. And once it gets over 50%, it also disables planetary FTL inhibitors. That's only relevant if you have the upgraded stronghold building. So devastation can be, of course, quite devastating for your planet. If you've destroyed the ships that were attacking your world, then gradually over time, devastation will tick down. So that's an additional thing to consider when you're doing your military campaigns. while bombarding enemy worlds might make it much easier to invade it, if you actually plan on conquering that world, it's going to take a much longer time for that planet to recover, and it will be that much more unstable due to the lack of housing and amenities. This can also be really useful against enemy worlds you don't intend on conquering, maybe tick up their devastation to ruin their economy for a while, and prevent them from bouncing back once the war is over. In the Economy tab, if you click on one of these categories, you can open up a drop-down menu that shows you an exact breakdown of what's going on with these different jobs. You can see the population actually working this specific job. You can also see the upkeep of the job as well as the output of it. So it is costing us 4 food and 1 consumer good to support the needs of these pops. And in return, they are producing 35 energy credits and 1 trade. You can click on this if you'd like a bigger breakdown of exactly what's going on and why you're getting these specific numbers. If you don't have enough pops to fill all of the jobs on your planets, typically they'll try and distribute across all of the jobs evenly, but sometimes you want to prioritize one job over the others. Say, for example, right now we really need minerals, we don't care as much about these other jobs. You can just click on the job and this will prioritize it. So now we have all of the miners working this job, but less on these ones. If you need even more control over it than that, you can actually go into here and use these slider bars to adjust things. So if we say wanted no technicians working at all, but an even spread between farmers and miners, we can do something like that. And then you can click on this restore jobs to bring them all back. Another thing that you'll notice is there's this little red section of the bar and it says 190 out of 200, but we have 200 pops working this job. So what does this mean? This is because we have a penalty to our job efficiency due to low planetary habitability. If we look here, we only have 90% habitability. This gives us an additional pop amenities usage, more pop upkeep. It reduces our job efficiency and reduces our pop growth speed. So having low habitability is absolutely devastating for your planets. So because of this penalty to our job efficiency, these 200 pops are working as if they were only 190 pops. If we look at our capital, we can actually see we're getting a plus 10% to our job efficiency, which means that this technician job here, even though we only have 400 pops working the job, it's as if we had 440 pops working this job, and we're getting that from our Empire Capital Colony Designation. If you click right here, you can access your colony designation. This gives you a bit of extra job efficiency for specific jobs. For example, if you want a world that's really focused on minerals, you can pick a mining world and get some extra job efficiency for your miners. This could be a good reason to specialize your worlds to make a specific thing so that you can stack this bonus on as many jobs as possible. That's generally a good long-term goal for your economy. At the start of the game, your planets will probably be doing quite a bit of everything, but as the game goes on and you unlock new technologies and settle new worlds, you want to try and stack as many bonuses as possible to make your economy really efficient. Some of the buildings that you can unlock can give you additional resources per job. These typically have a limit of how many you can build on the planet, but they allow you to make your jobs more productive. You can also research district specializations for your basic districts. These allow you to build special buildings such as the energy grid, which gets you an additional 0.5 energy for every 100 technicians on the planet. Also, you can find rare planetary features that can give you powerful bonuses for your planet. For example, for these 3 different strategic resources, volatile motes, exotic gases, and rare crystals, there's a variant of a planetary feature, such as the crystalline caverns here, that unlock a unique district specialization for your basic districts. And so, for example, what this does is it's converting our miner jobs on the planet into crystal miners, and allowing them to get some rare crystals. Or there's another one that can get you exotic gases from your agriculture district or volatile motes from your generator district. Another way you can get these strategic resources without having one of these rare planetary features is to research the different synthetic strategic resource buildings. For example, the chemical plants here, which increases the mineral upkeep of our industrialist jobs but gives them a small output of, in this case, volatile motes. These strategic resources are really important because they're required for the upkeep of a lot of really powerful buildings as well as building upgrades. You're eventually going to start running out of building slots on your planet. So say, for example, we can upgrade our alloy foundries into alloy mega foundries. This adds an upkeep of volatile motes, but it doubles the amount of jobs that this building gets us. Or say there's another building like this alloy reclamation plant that costs us some energy and volatile motes, but reduces the upkeep of our metallurgists, so that way they don't use as much of your minerals. Strategic resources are also used to get some of the more advanced ship upgrades and more. If over time your priorities change, you can click on one of your buildings and hit this replace button to swap it out with a different building. You can also change your district specialization with this button. Any buildings that will become invalid because of the new district specialization will be destroyed, but if that building will still be valid, it will actually be retained. So for example, these civilian industries buildings will be fine with a civilian industry district specialization, but they'll get destroyed if we switch over into heavy industry. So you don't have to stick with your decisions forever. You can re-optimize your planets later, or adjust things like maybe say, for example, you suddenly get into a really desperate war and actually you overbuilt consumer goods and you really need to build more ships because you just lost your entire fleet. You know, maybe that's when you'd consider switching some of your districts over into a more wartime economy. Another thing to think about as well is your empire size. Your districts, systems, colonies, and pops all increase your empire size. And once you go over 100 empire size, you get an increasing penalty to technology, tradition, and edict cost. And it also makes you weaker to espionage. So this is another reason to try and be efficient with your economy, so you minimize this penalty for the maximum economic output. Say, for example, because each colony is adding a flat 20 empire size, regardless of how developed that colony is, don't settle a colony unless you're actually going to be able to make it a productive asset for your empire. And similarly, don't just go building districts if you don't actually have the pops to employ those jobs that they're creating. Not only will you be paying for the upkeep, you'll also be slowing down your societal development. And I recommend thinking ahead with your economy. What will you need in the future and start working towards that now? Like, for example, if you have a scary rival right on your border and you expect them to declare war on you at some point, then it would probably be a good idea to invest into your alloys so that you can build up your navy. But alternatively, if all of your neighbors are friendly, you might want to focus more on your consumer goods so that you can outpace them in terms of research and traditions. Another thing to think about as well is if you're about to conquer a planet, you want a good reserve of different resources so that you can actually support that planet while you get it online. Because newly conquered planets typically have a lot less stability and thus less resource output, and that planet might not have been self-sufficient anyways. Say it had no agriculture, now you have to feed that planet instead of your enemy. When you conquer an enemy world, particularly if many of the pops on the planet have disappeared for some reason, and you have a bunch of infrastructure that you don't think you're going to be employing anytime soon, you can click on a building and use this demolish option to get rid of it. Another option is to disable buildings. This will instantly remove all of their effects as well as their upkeep, but it leaves the building intact so you can re-enable it whenever you want it again. There's no way to disable your districts, but you can downgrade them to remove a level from the district. Another thing to be aware of is when your ships are docked at a starbase with the crew quarters, it reduces their ship upkeep, and it also disables the trade costs for your fleets. So if you move your ships off of your starbase, you'll notice a sudden strain on your economy as you have to pay more trade for your ships, as well as more energy and alloys. So it's important to make sure you have good income or a big reserve of resources before you get into a war. If you have a shortage of a resource where you have a negative monthly income and no stockpile, you'll get some very negative penalties to your empire. Another mechanic in the game is that when you have a planetary deficit, even if your empire's resources are fine, to simulate the idea that the planet is importing those resources from your other worlds, you have to pay some trade for the logistics cost. It's not usually that big of a deal, you don't have to worry about it too much, but it is something to be aware of. If you specialize your world into just one thing, you're going to have to pay more trade for that, or you can try and make your planets more self-sufficient, where they feed themselves, they provide all of their own energy and such. Typically speaking though, the benefits of specializing your worlds outweighs the cost of that planetary deficit. That's where it can be valuable to find good synergies for your world. For example, if you see a world has a bunch of potential mining districts on it, then that would be a good place to put down an industrial world. That way you can build mining districts on the planet, and then that industry uses those minerals, rather than having your mining planet and your industry on two separate worlds, and then you need to fully import all of the minerals to that world. And then you can think about production chains like mining minerals, then refining them into consumer goods on that same world, and then using those consumer goods for your research or Unity. If all of this micromanagement of your planets is too much to deal with, particularly if it's the late game and you have tons and tons of colonies, you can click this button right here to open up the planet automation settings. This allows you to give control over your planet management to the AI, and there's a bunch of different options for what exactly you allow the AI to do. If you want to change these settings for all of the planets in your empire instead of just this one, you can use Control Click. And if you also want this setting to be applied to all new planets, say for example we want amenities disabled, we can Shift click this option, and now our amenities will be disabled for all new colonies. So when you're happy with your settings, you can click this button here to actually enable the automation on the planet. You can use Shift to enable automation on all of the planets in the sector and Control for all of the planets in your empire. Let's talk more about the market. There is a market fee that applies for every single transaction. So if, for example, we wanted to sell some food in order to get more minerals, every unit of food has a base price of 1 trade, but because of this 30% fee, we're only getting 0.7 trade for every 1 food. That is why if we sell 100 food, we'll only be getting 70 trade. And then if we go to buy minerals, every single unit of minerals costs 1 trade value as well. But because of this market fee, the price is increased by 30% to 1.3. So we're losing another 30% of value by clicking this button. So while you can use the market to basically convert one resource into another resource, it's going to be more efficient to produce the resource directly. So generally speaking, you want to try and have a long-term plan for what resources you're going to need and produce the right amount, but the market can be very useful to deal with unexpected problems. Another mechanic of the market is supply and demand. Because we sold that food, we have reduced the price of food. Previously we were making 0.7 trade value per 1 food, and now we're only making 0.69 trade value per 1 food. So the more you saturate the market, say you're selling a bunch of stuff, the price is going to crash because there's too much supply. And the inverse, if you're buying too much, the price is going to go up from a lack of supply. So these minerals that we bought, we've increased the trade value cost per 1 mineral from 1.3 to 1.32. So the more that you buy or sell, the less efficient the trade is going to get. However, naturally over time, it will restabilize back to the base price. This is why it's better to make lots of little small trades than few really huge ones. So that's where you have the option for monthly trades. You can set up a buy or sell order that will happen at the end of every month. So say, for example, we want to spend some of our trade value to buy, say, 10 minerals every single month. We can go ahead and add this. Particularly in the early game, setting up a monthly trade to get as many minerals as possible can be really useful because your minerals are a really big bottleneck in that early game stage. And typically you're going to start the game with a big surplus of stuff you don't really need as much of, like say food and maybe energy. So while you get your mineral production online, this can be a good way of making sure you're still getting a good amount of minerals and not slowing down your growth. That's everything I wanted to cover in this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. And with that, goodbye.